The chamber of the Galactic Council was silent at first. Hundreds of alien leaders sat in a wide circle, their glowing eyes fixed on the center stage. A single figure walked forward, tall and cold, robes flowing behind like a shadow. The air itself seemed heavy, as if the room carried the weight of 1,000 decisions. Beyond the glass walls of the chamber, planets turned slowly, and massive starships drifted like giants in the void. The council had gathered for one reason: humanity. For years, humans had risen faster than anyone thought possible. They built ships that reached across the stars, colonies on worlds that once belonged only to legend. They were bold, curious, and restless. Too restless. Now the council whispered among themselves that Earth had crossed boundaries no species should cross. One elder of the council stood, his voice deep and cold. He spoke in a language that echoed across the chamber, translated instantly into every ear. He said humanity was reckless. He said humans had ignored warnings. He said they had entered forbidden space, broken ancient rules, and disturbed things older than the council itself. The chamber rumbled with voices. Some demanded punishment. Others called for caution. A few even spoke with respect, saying humanity was dangerous because of its strength. But most agreed on one thing: the humans had gone too far. At the center, the high speaker of the council raised her hand. The noise fell silent. She was calm, but her words cut like steel. She said humanity would be given one last chance. If they did not bend, they would be broken. The words hung in the air like a blade, and many in the chamber nodded in agreement. But deep in the shadows of the chamber, not all were certain. A younger member of the council leaned close to his neighbor and whispered that this was a mistake. He said humans were not like the other races they had controlled. He said humans carried something dangerous inside them, something that could not be chained. His neighbor ignored him. The decision had already been made. Outside the chamber, fleets waited. Thousands of warships hung in orbit like predators ready to strike. They did not move, not yet. They waited for the final order. Inside, the high speaker lifted a small device, and a glowing map of the galaxy spread across the room. Red lines marked the zones where humanity had built colonies. Yellow markers showed the borders they had crossed. A great scar of light cut through the map where the humans had entered space no one dared to go. The high speaker pointed to it and declared that Earth had defied the will of the council. She said it could not go unpunished. The chamber roared with voices again. Some called for sanctions. Others demanded the burning of colonies. One counselor slammed his fist on the table and shouted that humanity should be erased before it grew stronger. The sound of his words echoed, dark and final, but among the noise, a few counselors sat still, silent, their eyes narrowed. They had studied humanity more closely than the others. They had seen the history of Earth, the endless wars, the rise and fall of empires. They had seen how humans fought, not only with weapons, but with spirit. They knew what happened when humans were pushed too far. Still, the council moved forward. A vote was called. One by one, hands rose, claws lifted, tendrils uncoiled. The majority was clear. The council would send a warning to Earth. It would not be soft. It would not be kind. It would be the kind of warning that carried the weight of death behind it. The high speaker's voice rang out once more. She declared that the council's message would be sent at once. Humanity would kneel or be crushed. The chamber filled with agreement. For many, it felt like victory. For others, it felt like the first crack of thunder before a storm. In the silence that followed, one old counselor spoke softly. His voice was almost too quiet to hear, but it carried across the chamber. He said, "You do not understand them. You believe fear will break them, but fear is their fire. And when the fire burns, it does not stop until everything around it is ash." His words were ignored, swept away by the voices of those eager for control. But in that moment, a shadow of doubt passed over the chamber. The decision was made, yet unease lingered in the air. Heavy and sharp, the meeting ended with the counselors rising from their seats, their robes whispering against the floor. The high speaker stood alone at the center, staring out into the stars beyond the glass wall. Her expression was calm, almost proud. She believed the council had acted with strength. She believed the humans would finally learn their place. But the stars beyond the glass seemed to shimmer with quiet warning, as if the galaxy itself knew the truth. Humanity was not broken. Humanity was waiting. And when the council's message reached Earth, when the words of threat and power echoed across human colonies, something would shift. A silence would spread first, a silence made of anger. Then, slowly, it would grow into a storm. For now, the council chamber stood quiet, the decision complete. Yet in the depths of space, unseen by alien eyes, human warships prepared. Engines stirred in secret hangars. Commanders whispered in dark rooms. Plans were drawn in silence. Humanity had heard the words of the council before in different ages and different forms. Always the same kneel, obey, surrender. But this time would be different. This time, the story would not end as the council expected. The chamber lights dimmed as the counselors left. One by one, their shadows stretching long across the floor. Outside, the fleets turned slowly, engines glowing. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The warning was ready. The message would soon be sent, and far away, on a small blue world. The storm of humanity waited for the first strike. The message from the Galactic. Council did not take long to reach Earth. It arrived as a stream of signals, cold and sharp, broadcast across every human colony, every station, and every fleet. The translation was clear and brutal. Humanity had crossed forbidden borders. Humanity had broken the rules of the stars. Humanity would kneel or be crushed. On Earth, the message played in government halls and military command centers. It played on giant screens in cities, in colonies under red suns, in mining stations on frozen moons. People stopped what they were doing and listened in silence. The voice of the council was calm, but its meaning was a threat. The words cut deeper than steel. At first, there was confusion. Some thought it was a mistake. Others believed it was only a warning, nothing more. But as the message repeated, as the full meaning sank in, confusion turned to anger. In crowded streets, whispers spread fast. Families gathered around screens. Workers in factories stopped their machines. Soldiers on distant bases clenched their fists. They all asked the same question. Why? Why now? Humanity had given much to the galaxy. They had fought beside council fleets in old wars. They had traded knowledge, medicine, and technology. They had shared their strength, their creativity, their endless drive to explore. And now, the same council they had once helped treated them like criminals. In a secure bunker beneath the United Earth's command, the highest leaders gathered. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and presidents from across Earth and the colonies stood around a massive table glowing with maps of the stars. The council's message played once more. The silence that followed was heavy. A general finally spoke. His voice was low, but filled with fury. They don't want justice, he said. They want control. They fear what we are becoming. Another leader, older and calm, shook her head. They have armies larger than ours, fleets beyond number. If they come with their full strength, we cannot win. The words hung in the air. No one wanted to admit it, but it was true. The council ruled the stars with countless species under their command. Humanity was strong, but not yet their equal. Not yet. Then, in the corner of the room, a scientist placed her hand on the table. They underestimate us, she said quietly. They see our numbers, our ships, our colonies, but they do not see the one thing they should fear most. The room turned to her. She leaned closer, her eyes sharp. They do not see our will. For a moment, the silence broke. The generals exchanged looks. Some nodded slowly. Others frowned. But the truth was clear. Humanity had survived worse before. Earth's history was filled with wars, with invasions, with enemies who thought they could break the human spirit. None had succeeded. Far from Earth, in a colony on the edge of council space, soldiers gathered in a mess hall as the message played on a screen. Their faces were tense, their hands tight on their cups of water. The voice of the council ended with its final words: "Kneel or be crushed." The soldiers did not speak for a long time. Then one of them laughed, a short, sharp sound. Others turned to him in surprise. He shook his head. "Do they really think we'll kneel?" The laughter spread, bitter at first, then strong. Someone slammed a fist on the table. Someone else shouted, "Let them come." Soon the hall was filled with voices, not of fear, but of defiance. But not all were so quick to cheer. In secret corners of the colonies, whispers of worry spread. Families feared for their children. Farmers on distant worlds asked what would happen if the council fleets came. Merchants wondered if their ships would be hunted in the dark. Even so, the anger grew stronger than the fear. Humanity was restless now. It's like a storm waiting for release. In a military hangar deep beneath the oceans of Earth, new warships waited. Their designs were secret, built with technology the Council did not know humans had developed. Black holes shaped for speed, cannons that glowed with strange energy, engines that roared like thunder when they lit. Engineers whispered that these ships could turn battles, but they were not ready, not yet. In another corner of the galaxy, on a mining station orbiting a cold world, a radio operator picked up a strange signal. At first, it seemed like static. Then it grew clearer. It was the sound of engines, hundreds of them, moving together. The operator froze. He ran to his commander. The signal was tracked and confirmed. A fleet was moving. Not a human fleet. A council fleet. The report reached Earth in less than an hour. In the bunker beneath United Earth Command, the leaders listened in silence. The message was clear. The council was not waiting. They were already coming. A commander slammed his fist on the table. "This is not a warning," he growled. "This is war." The leaders stood in silence for a long moment. Some were afraid. Some were furious. But all of them knew the truth. There was no more time to argue. One by one, they turned to the central figure in the room. The commander of the United Earth Fleet. His face was calm, his eyes steady. He looked around the table, then at the glowing map of the stars. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "We will not kneel." The words echoed through the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. Generals stood straighter. Scientists tightened their hands. Leaders lifted their chins. The decision was made. Orders spread like fire. Fleets were recalled. Colonies were warned. Soldiers were prepared. Factories turned to war production. Humanity had heard the Council's words, and humanity had answered. On Earth, in cities filled with millions, screens lit up with breaking news. The Council's warning had been received. The United Earth Alliance had spoken. Humanity would not kneel. The streets erupted with voices. Some cheered. Some shouted in anger. But one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer afraid. In the darkness of space, fleets stirred. Engines lit with a low growl. Warships began to move from their hidden docks. The storm had begun, and in the silence between the stars, the Council's fleets drew closer, confident, certain of their victory. They did not yet know what was waiting for them, because humanity had been warned. Humanity had been threatened, and humanity had decided they would not kneel. The Council fleet was already on the move. Thousands of alien warships crossed the void with glowing engines, their hulls sharp and cold like blades. In their minds, victory was certain. Humanity would be crushed before it even had time to resist. But far away, in the command halls of Earth, another kind of fire was growing. Inside the United Earth Fleet headquarters, the commander stood before his people. The room was filled with generals, admirals, and representatives from every colony. Their faces were tense, their eyes fixed on him. Everyone waited for his words. For a long moment, he said nothing. He looked at the glowing star map above the table, where the Council fleet was marked as a wave of red moving closer and closer to human space. The silence in the room was heavy, like the air before a storm. Then, at last, the commander spoke. His voice was low but steady. "We will not kneel." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of Earth's history. Every war, every invasion, every time humanity had been pushed to the edge, they echoed in that one line. The room stirred. Some nodded slowly. Others clenched their fists. The fire spread from his voice into their hearts. He raised his hand toward the star map. The Council believes we are weak. They believe they can frighten us into submission. They do not understand what we are. They do not understand that the harder you press humanity, the harder we push back. They want us to kneel. Instead, we will stand. And when they strike, we will strike harder. The words were carried across the galaxy, repeated by generals to their soldiers, by officers to their crews, by leaders to their people. In the colonies, men and women gathered in hangars, loading weapons, preparing ships. Farmers left their fields to volunteer. Engineers worked day and night, finishing weapons that had been hidden until now. Scientists revealed secret projects that had been prepared for years in case the Council ever turned its gaze against Earth. One of these projects was known only as the Black Fleet. Warships built in silence. Hidden beneath oceans and deep in the shadows of asteroids, they were unlike any ships humanity had ever launched. Sleek, fast, with weapons designed not just to defend, but to break through the strongest of enemy lines. They had never been tested in battle. Now they would be. On Mars, workers in armored suits stood on the red surface, watching as massive battleships lifted into the sky, engines glowing bright against the dusty horizon. Children in domes pressed their faces to the glass as the ships roared upward, leaving trails of fire behind. They did not cheer. They were silent, filled with awe and fear, in a secret station orbiting Saturn. An admiral walked along a hangar filled with dark warships. Pilots stood at attention, waiting for orders. He stopped before them and said only one thing: the Council is coming. We do not wait for them to strike first. We move. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, ordinary people gathered in the streets. The Council's message still echoed on giant screens, their threat repeated again and again. But instead of fear, defiance grew. Citizens painted banners with words of resistance. They shouted in unison, "We will not kneel." The sound filled the cities like thunder, but not everyone agreed. In hidden rooms, small groups of politicians and businessmen whispered that perhaps surrender was better. They feared the size of the Council's fleets, the sheer number of soldiers and ships. They thought humanity could not win. They argued that survival was more important than pride. The commander knew this too. He knew that war would not only be fought in space, but in hearts and minds. He also knew one truth: surrender would not save them. The Council's words had made that clear. Humanity would never be treated as equals. They would be ruled, or they would be destroyed. That night, he stood alone in the command tower looking out at the stars. His reflection shone in the glass as the planets drifted silently beyond. He thought of Earth's past, of the battles fought long before humanity reached the stars. He thought of the men and women who had stood against empires, who had chosen freedom over chains. He whispered the words again to himself, quiet but unshaken. "We will not kneel." Across the colonies, the sparks spread like wildfire. Soldiers spoke the words before battle drills. Engineers carved them into the hulls of new ships. Families whispered them to their children at night, not as a threat, but as a promise. The Council still believed the humans would break. They still believed fear would silence them. But humanity had chosen a different path. The first signs came when a small human, Scode fleet disappeared from Council sensors. At first the aliens thought it was destroyed. But then, in a dark corner of space, one of their supply convoys was attacked. A dozen ships were lost, burned in silence. The humans had struck first. The Council chamber filled with outrage. How dare they resist? How dare they fight back? The High Speaker ordered the fleets to advance faster. She promised that humanity would be crushed for their arrogance. But even as the words left her mouth, human fleets were already moving, slipping through dark corridors of space, preparing to strike again. The spark had been lit. It was no longer only in speeches or whispers. It was in the engines of warships, in the hearts of soldiers. It's in the blood of every human who looked at the stars and refused to bow. The commander knew the storm was coming. He did not fear it. He had seen it before in Earth's history, and he knew the truth the Council had forgotten. A people who refuse to kneel cannot be controlled. They can only be fought, and humanity was ready to fight. The darkness of space stretched endless, silent, and cold. Stars shimmered like distant sparks, but between them, the void was empty until the Council's warships arrived. Their fleet was massive, a tide of steel and fire crossing into human territory. Hundreds of alien ships glided forward, their engines burning blue, their weapons glowing with deadly light. They moved as one, disciplined and confident. Believing this battle would be simple, at the edge of a human colony world, their shadows fell. Families on the surface looked up, their skies filled with unnatural lights. Fear swept through the streets as alarms screamed across the settlements. For many, this was the first time. They had seen the true power of the Galactic Council. The lead alien commander sent a single message to the planet below. The voice was cold, almost casual. You have 1 hour to surrender. Fail, and you will be erased. The Council ships shifted into attack formation, confident that humanity would bow. After all, every species before them had bowed. But humanity was different. From the far side of the system, engines ignited. Shadows moved. Hidden among asteroids and fragments of rock, human warships came alive. Their black holes absorbed the light, their weapons charged silently, their engines whispered instead of roared. The Black Fleet was here. The alien commander watched his screens as blips appeared on the edges of the radar. At first, he dismissed them as debris, but then more appeared, and then more. Dozens of signals began to move with purpose. Surrounding the Council fleet like wolves circling prey, confusion spread through the alien ranks. Reports came too late. By the time they realized what was happening, humanity had already struck. The first volley came without warning. From the shadows, human ships launched streams of plasma fire. Blue light tore through the void, slamming into alien cruisers. 2 ships were ripped apart instantly, their hulls breaking into fire. The explosions lit up the void like suns. Panic spread across the alien fleet. They had expected surrender. They had expected fear. Instead, they were being ambushed. Human warships surged forward from the dark, their black holes blending with the void. They moved faster than expected, their weapons striking with precision. Alien cruisers returned fire, beams of green and red cutting through space. The void became a storm of light and death. On the surface of the colony, people stared upward. The night sky was filled with fire as ships clashed above their heads. Some prayed. Some cried. Others clenched their fists, whispering the words that had become a promise. We will not kneel, in orbit. A human battleship, the Iron Will, pushed through the front lines. Its cannons fired again and again, tearing through the shields of a massive Council destroyer. The alien ship roared in flame, breaking apart into shards that spun into the void. Cheers erupted from the human crew, their voices shaking the decks. But victory did not come without cost. A smaller human frigate was caught by 3 alien fighters. Beams cut across its hull, slicing through armor. The ship broke apart, fire consuming it as its crew cried out in their final moments. Across the fleet, men and women gritted their teeth as they watched their comrades fall. The battle was not a game. It was survival. The alien commander shouted orders, rallying his forces. His ships reformed into tight lines, pouring fire into the human fleet. Beams of energy struck the Iron Will, tearing across its side. Metal screamed as explosions tore open its decks. Still, it fought on, refusing to fall. Human tactics were different from the Council's, where the aliens relied on size and numbers. Humans fought with speed and unpredictability. Their ships weaved through the void, striking hard, vanishing into shadows, and striking again. One human captain, flying the ship's silent spear, led his crew directly into the heart of the alien fleet. Enemy fire rained down around them, but he did not stop. His ship cut through the formation, launching torpedoes that ripped open to enemy cruisers, before vanishing back into the dark. His crew laughed through the chaos, not with joy, but with fury. The alien commander finally understood what was happening. This was not a desperate defense. This was a trap. Humanity had planned for this moment, had lured the fleet into the system, knowing they would come with arrogance. The humans were not running. They were hunting. Minutes turned to hours. The battle stretched across the void, the stars lit with fire. Ship after ship fell, human and alien alike. Each explosion was a sun that died too soon, scattering light into the emptiness. At last, the tide began to turn. Human ships surrounded the remaining alien cruisers, their weapons cutting through weakened shields. The Council fleet began to retreat, their formations broken, their pride shattered. The alien commander, wounded but alive, stared at the screens in disbelief. No fleet had ever resisted the Council like this. No fleet had dared. And yet here were the humans, striking with a fury that shook even his hardened heart. He gave the order to withdraw. What was left of his fleet turned and fled into the void, leaving behind burning wreckage and silence. On the surface of the colony, the alarms finally fell quiet. Survivors looked to the skies, now filled with drifting fire. They knew the battle was not over. More fleets would come, but for the first time, they believed. Humanity could fight. Humanity could win. In the command deck of the Iron Will, smoke filled the air. Crew members worked to put out fires, their uniforms torn and burned. The commander stood tall, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Send the message," he ordered. The communications officer nodded and opened a channel across human space. The commander's words echoed to every colony, every station, every ship. The Council struck first. We struck back, and we will strike again. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity fights. Across the colonies, cheers rose. Soldiers raised their weapons. Civilians lifted their fists. The words spread like fire, but far away in the council chamber, silence ruled. Reports of the battle reached the leaders. Their fleets had been defeated in their first strike. Their pride had been torn apart. The High Speaker's face was pale. She clenched her fists, her voice shaking with rage. "Then we will send more. We will send everything." She did not understand the truth. The more the Council pushed, the stronger humanity would become. The first clash was over. But the war had only just begun. The wreckage of the first battle still drifted in the void. Shattered ships spun silently, broken metal reflecting the light of distant suns. For the first time in memory, a Council fleet had been forced to retreat. The survivors whispered the same words again and again. The humans fought back, across human space. Those words spread like fire. Colonies cheered. Soldiers lifted their heads with pride. Families who once feared the Council now spoke with hope. Humanity had done more than survive. It stood against the might of the galaxy and held their ground. But the commander knew the truth. Victory in one battle was not enough. The Council had fleets beyond counting. They would return, stronger, angrier, with vengeance in their hearts. If humanity waited, they would be crushed. There was only one choice: to strike first. In the war room beneath Earth, the leaders gathered again. The star map glowed, filled with red markers showing the Council's strength. Against them, the human fleet was only a fraction. The silence was heavy. Finally, the commander spoke. "If we wait, we die. If we hide, we die. The only way forward is through them. We strike, and we strike where they do not expect it." The general frowned. "You mean, into their own space?" "Yes," the commander said simply. "We carry the war to them." At first, the room was filled with protest. The Council's territory was vast. Their defenses were powerful. No species had ever dared to attack them at their core. But slowly, the protests turned to silence. Everyone remembered what had already happened. Humanity had done what no one believed possible. The plan was born. Small fleets, fast and silent, would slip into Council space. They would not aim for their strongest worlds. They would not fight their largest armies. Instead, They would strike at the lifeblood of the Council, their supply routes, their fuel stations, their hidden factories, and so the raids began in the shadow of a dying star. A convoy of Council ships carried resources to the front lines. They moved slowly, guarded by a few escorts. Suddenly, from the darkness, human warships appeared. They came fast, engines roaring, weapons blazing. Within minutes, the convoy was going to burn, shattered, erased. The supplies never reached the fleet in another corner of space. A massive orbital factory churned out weapons for the Council. Workers and soldiers believed themselves safe, far from the front. Then, alarms screamed. Human torpedoes tore through the factory's heart, turning it into a sun of fire. The explosion was so bright, it could be seen on nearby moons. Survivors whispered in terror, the humans are everywhere. Each raid cut deeper. Each strike left the Council weaker. At first they laughed at the reports, saying they were lies. But as the attacks grew, as fleets starved, as colonies cried for aid, fear began to spread. Inside the great chamber of the Council, voices rose in panic. One shouted, "They are not waiting for us. They are coming for us." Another cried, "Our people are afraid." The entire world's whisper that the humans cannot be stopped. The high speaker slammed her hand against the table. Enough. They are nothing but one world, one people. We are the Council. We rule the stars. We will crush them. But even as she spoke, her voice shook. She too had seen the reports. She too felt the shadow of doubt. Meanwhile, among humanity, the raids became legend. Pilots returned with stories of impossible victories. Soldiers spoke of fire raining down on alien strongholds. Civilians, once afraid, now whispered with pride. For the first time, they were not prey. They were the hunters, yet victory carried a cost. Human fleets fought hard, but each strike left scars. Ships were lost. Brave men and women did not return. Families grieved. The war was far from easy. But the pain only hardened humanity's will. The Council had forced them into a corner. Now, humanity would push outward, no matter the price. One night, in the command tower of the Iron Will, the commander looked out at the stars. Reports of another raid had arrived, another convoy destroyed, another Council world shaken. His officers waited for his words. They thought we would bow, he said quietly. Instead, we have made them bleed. And the more they bleed, the more they fear. Across Council space, fear indeed spread like a disease. Citizens who once believed their leaders were untouchable, now doubted. They whispered that perhaps the Council had met its match. Perhaps the humans were stronger than anyone had ever imagined. The turning point had come. Humanity was no longer simply defending its homes. It was no longer waiting for the storm. Humanity had become the storm. And in the Council chamber, the truth could no longer be ignored. The humans had struck deeper than any enemy before them. Their raids were relentless, their courage unshaken. If this war continued, the galaxy itself might change forever. One counselor, old and weary, rose from his seat. His voice was soft, but it silenced the chamber. You wanted them to kneel, he said. Instead, you have taught them to fight. And now, the more you try to break them, the stronger they will become. The chamber filled with uneasy silence. For the first time, the Council feared, and somewhere in the depths of human space, fleets prepared for the next strike. The raids had spread fear like wildfire. Convoys destroyed. Factories burning. Worlds once thought untouchable, now scarred by human strikes. Every new attack left the Council weaker, not only in strength, but in spirit. In the Council chamber, panic grew. Leaders argued, shouting over one another. One demanded larger fleets. Another screamed for extermination. A few whispered of peace, but their voices were drowned by rage. Still, no matter how loud they argued, the truth was clear. Humanity was not breaking. Humanity was rising, and then came the day humanity chose to speak. On a captured Council outpost, human soldiers stood guard over shattered alien banners. Fire still burned in the distance. In the center of the command hall, cameras were set up. Engineers worked quickly, linking the broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. The message would not only reach the Council, it would reach their people, their soldiers, their colonies. The commander stood before the lens. His uniform was torn from battle, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with unshaken fire. Around him, flags of Earth and the colonies hung in defiance. The room grew silent as the signal went live. Across Council space, screens flickered. Citizens paused in their homes. Soldiers froze at their posts. Even in the Council chamber, the great screen lit up. The commander's face appeared before them. He spoke with calm, steady words. People of the galaxy, for years, humanity has worked beside you. We traded with you. We fought wars with you. We shed blood for peace. But the Council has chosen to call us criminals. They crossed into our homes, into our lives, and demanded we kneel. His voice grew harder. We will not kneel, the words echoed across worlds. On distant colonies, alien workers stared in silence. On warships, soldiers shifted uneasily. In the Council chamber, leaders gritted their teeth. The commander leaned closer, his voice sharper now. You call us reckless. You call us dangerous? But the truth is this. You fear us. You fear what we will become. You fear that one day you will no longer rule us. And now, that day has come. Behind him, images appeared, videos of Council fleets burning, convoys destroyed, factories reduced to ash. Proof of every strike humanity had delivered. The galaxy watched in shock. The Council had promised their people that humans were weak, fragile, unable to resist. The truth on the screens told a different story. The commander's eyes burned like fire. We did not ask for this war, but you brought it to us, and now we will finish it. Every fleet you send will fall. Every threat you make will be answered. You think we fight alone, but we do not. We fight with every man, woman, and child who chooses freedom over chains. We fight with every heart that refuses to kneel. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us unstoppable. The words struck deeper than any weapon. Across alien worlds, silence filled the streets. Many had never heard a human speak before. They had been told humans were dangerous beasts, wild and uncontrolled. But the voice they heard was calm, steady, and unbroken. It was not the voice of prey. It was the voice of defiance. The commander ended with a final line. His words were quiet, almost soft, but carried more power than 1,000 fleets. Remember this, we did not start this war. But when it ends, it will end on our terms. Humanity does not kneel. The signal cut. The galaxy sat in silence. On alien worlds, citizens whispered. On Council ships, soldiers looked at one another with doubt. Even in the chamber itself, the leaders felt the weight of fear pressing down. The High Speaker stood, furious, shouting that the humans would pay, that they would be crushed. But her words sounded weaker now, her voice drowned out by the silence of those who no longer believed. In human space, the reaction was fire. Colonies erupted in cheers. Soldiers repeated the message over and over. Families cried with pride. For the first time, the galaxy had heard the human voice. Not as servants, not as subjects, but as equals or as something greater. The raids continued. But now, every strike carried more weight. Each battle was no longer just a fight for survival. It was proof of the message. Humanity was not only resisting, they were inspiring. Even among the Council's people, cracks began to show. Small rebellions sparked on outer colonies. Some soldiers hesitated before firing on human fleets. The myth of the Council's absolute power had been shattered in the command deck of the Iron Will. The commander stood with his officers. Reports of unrest across the galaxy reached them one after another. He listened quietly, then nodded. It begins, he said. For centuries, the Council had ruled through fear. But now, humanity had stolen that weapon and turned it against them. The galaxy no longer looked at humans as a small, fragile species. Now, they looked at them as something far more dangerous. The council had wanted obedience. Instead, they had lit a fire. And that fire was spreading. The war was no longer just a war. It was a movement. The galaxy had changed. Once the council had spoken, and all worlds obeyed. Their fleets had been endless, their power unquestioned. But now, whispers filled their streets. Fear haunted their fleets. Humanity's shadow stretched across the stars. In every colony, in every garrison, doubt spread. The broadcasts of the humans had not been forgotten. Humanity does not kneel, the words echoed again and again. Even council soldiers, once loyal, now asked themselves if their leaders had lied. And now, as the council gathered for one final meeting in the great chamber, the weight of those words pressed down upon them. The chamber, once filled with arrogance and pride, was heavy with silence. Leaders who once shouted, now spoke in whispers. Reports covered the tables. Fleets destroyed, convoys lost, rebellions rising on council worlds. Humanity was not just winning battles, they were changing the galaxy. The high speaker rose, her voice trembling with rage. We cannot yield. If we surrender to humans, every world will rise against us. Our rule will end. We must strike with all that remains. We must burn them out of existence. Her words echoed, but fewer heads nodded than before. Some counselors shifted uneasily. Others looked away. At last one old counselor stood. His face was worn with years of service, his eyes heavy with truth. You do not understand, he said quietly. This war is already lost. Gasps filled the chamber. The high speaker glared at him with fury. Lost? You dare speak such weakness? But the old counselor did not flinch. Look beyond these walls, he said. Your fleets are broken. Your factories burn. Your colonies whisper rebellion. And the humans are not afraid. Every battle makes them stronger. Every strike makes them bolder. This is not weakness. This is the end of our age. The chamber fell into silence. The truth hung in the air like a storm no one could deny, and then the alarms rang. The council chamber shook as warning lights flashed. A voice cried out, "Enemy fleets detected!" Thousands of ships approaching the capital. Panic erupted. Council members shouted in fear. Some fled the chamber. Others called for guards. But outside, beyond the capital world, as the truth unfolded, the largest human fleet ever assembled moved through the void. Warships of every design, battered but unbroken, advanced in formation. The Iron Will led the charge, its hull scarred from battles, its guns burning bright. Around it, cruisers and destroyers moved like wolves circling their prey. The Council's last fleets rushed to meet them, but hesitation filled their ranks. Already broken by endless defeats, they fought without unity. Some even refused to engage. Humanity's fire cut through them like a blade through glass. Inside the Iron Will, the commander stood on the bridge. His eyes locked on the glowing image of the Council's capital. His officers waited for the order. They wanted to see us kneel, he said quietly. Let them see us stand. Bring us in. The human fleet surged forward from the surface of the capital world. Citizens looked to the skies in terror as fire streaked across the heavens. For the first time in history, the Council's home trembled beneath invasion. In the chamber, chaos ruled. The High Speaker screamed for resistance, for glory, for vengeance. But her voice no longer commanded the room. Many counselors had already fled. Some collapsed into silence. At last, a decision had to be made. The old counselor rose again, his voice carrying across the chaos. If we fight now, we lose everything. If we surrender, perhaps some part of us survives. But make no mistake, humanity has already won. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, one by one, heads bowed. The High Speaker's voice broke with rage. Traitors, cowards, you will doom us all. But her cries were drowned out by the sound of surrender. A signal was sent. Trembling and uncertain, but clear enough, the Council would yield on the Iron Will. The commander received the message. His officers looked at him in disbelief. Victory was here, yet silence filled the bridge. He finally spoke, broadcast to the galaxy. Moments later, his voice filled every world once ruled by the Council. This war is over. The Council has fallen. From this day forward, humanity stands free. We did not seek this war, but we will finish what was forced upon us. Remember this truth. No chain can bind those who refuse to kneel. The words thundered across the stars. Alien citizens cheered. Soldiers laid down arms. The Council's reign, once eternal, crumbled in a single day. But even as victory spread, the commander's gaze remained cold. He knew the cost: thousands of lives lost, worlds scarred, families broken. Humanity had survived, but survival had demanded fire and blood on the bridge of the Iron Will. He spoke one final line, not for the galaxy, but for those who stood with him. We were forced to fight. We were forced to bleed. And now the galaxy will never forget. Humanity does not kneel. The stars outside burned bright with wreckage. The silence of victory, heavy and endless. The war was over. But the legend had only just begun. That closes the story. Humanity rises from prey to conqueror, forcing the galaxy to respect them forever. Suspense is kept till the end, with the audience left imagining what happens after humanity becomes a galactic power.